Good afternoon, Your Honors. This is case number IT 0588/2T, the prosecutor versus Zdravko Tolimir. Thank you.
This is the last day of our proceedings before we come to the final session at the end of the year, hopefully. Mr. Tolimir, again, if there is any need to have a break, then you should indicate that to the chamber. Today we start with the remainder of the closing arguments of the defense for 15 minutes, followed by rebuttal arguments and then possibly rejoinder arguments by the defense, and then some administrative matters. Mr. Tolimir, you have the floor, and I hope you are able to stick to the 15 minutes. But before you start, did the interpreters and the court reporter receive hard copies of the statement you are now delivering? I see Mr. Gajic nodding. I take it that this is the case. Mr. Tolimir, you have the floor.
Thank you. The remainder will be quite brief, and we'll be able to deliver it within the given time. Thank you. Let me resume. That the commander could issue orders directly to all the members of the main staff is clearly confirmed by the situation described by Keserovic at transcript pages 13925 to 13928, where he received the order related to Srebrenica directly from the commander. At page 13956, Keserovic clearly said that he was supposed to submit the report, or to report, in fact, directly to the commander. D143 clearly indicates how they were deployed to the combat area, and I mean the senior officers from the intelligence and security. Keserovic from the security administration, and Stankovic from the intelligence administration. So you can clearly see that Tolimir could not directly deploy anyone to the combat area or issue orders to them, and that's quite clear if you look at the situation with regard to all the other officers who were deployed to the front line. It's therefore an erroneous conclusion, one, that Tolimir could issue orders where there's an operation in course. Only the commander of that operation can issue orders to those involved. Otherwise, the system of command and singleness of command would fall apart. In their final brief, the prosecution said that Tolimir had the duty to ensure that the prisoners of war from Srebrenica were treated in a humane manner. First of all, when it comes to prisoners of war in Srebrenica, Tolimir had no duties whatsoever, either in terms of detaining them, accommodating them, or their treatment. The obligation to adhere to the rules of the Geneva Conventions relating to the treatment of war prisoners was incumbent upon the unit that detained those war prisoners, or under whose authority they were kept. Tolimir did not have the duty, nor was it his duty, to tour the prisoners of war from Srebrenica, or to take care of each and every one of them. From the 12th of July through to the end of July, Tolimir had duties that had to do with the civilian population and the authorities in Žepa. The responsibility over prisoners of war was vested with the unit that detained them or the unit that they had surrendered to. And this is clearly indicated in Exhibit D148, item 295, which states that the logistics support of war prisoners is one that is provided by logistics organs and other organs of the unit or units that have detained them. The Security and Intelligence Administration had no jurisdiction at all or authority to in any way take care of the prisoners of war. The closing arguments of prosecution clearly stated, and I will quote, that Tolimir was in command of and oversaw people who detained and killed Palic. Tolimir was on the Western Front at the time, and witness Pečanac, the witness of the prosecution, clearly listed the names of the individuals before this trial chamber who were the ones that he was in contact with before Palic's surrender and detention.
Please read a little bit more slowly. It's a very high speed. Continue, please.
Thank you, sir. Let me repeat. Mr. Pečanac clearly listed the names of these individuals. Since this was in closed session, I cannot refer to them now. Nevertheless, Tolimir was not mentioned in his report at all, nor was Tolimir in that part of the front. He was in the westernmost part of the front, where an aggression against Republika Srpska was ongoing by NATO, the Croatian army, and the army of the BH Federation. Since the prosecution do not have and cannot possibly have any evidence to the effect that Tolimir participated in the murder operation of the war prisoners of Srebrenica, the prosecution advanced a case whereby Tolimir committed a crime by not having or by having failed to take certain measures. And they do so by advancing an unsubstantiated assertion whereby Tolimir decided not to do anything because he was a member of the joint criminal enterprise. And the prosecution based this case of theirs on the fact that Tolimir was assistant commander for intelligence and security in the main staff of the VRS. This sort of case is completely speculative, arbitrary, and without foundation in evidence. First of all, the prosecution can have no evidence, possibly, of the fact that Tolimir knew that a murder operation was ongoing in the relevant time period, or that he decided by his own will or in the absence of his own will to participate in it. He cannot participate in something he knows nothing of. Yesterday we spoke of the role of Tolimir during the evacuation of the population of Žepa. Tolimir was part of the escort of the convoy. And witness Čarkić testified to his conduct in Žepa in his statement given to the prosecution, namely Exhibit D, Interpreter's Correction 219, page 19 in Serbian and 13 in English, as well as page 21 in Serbian and 14 in English. Let me cite only one sentence here out of his statement, which reads that on the part of Tolimir, and I quote, "There had been no orders save for him insisting that nothing should happen," unquote. As for Tolimir's treatment of the prisoners of war and the instructions issued in relation to the treatment of the prisoners of war, and as well as the way in which he responded to the evacuation in terms of what needed to have been done or not, can be gleaned from Exhibit P1434, pages 3 and 4 in Serbian and pages 5 and 6 in English.
Tužilaštvo je predložilo predsjedniku vijeću da
The prosecution moved that the trial chamber should find the accused guilty and to render a sentence of life imprisonment. The prosecution based their case on the assumption that Tolimir was on an assumption that relies upon the fact that Tolimir was assistant commander for intelligence and security. Now, this request on the part of the prosecution is based on the fact that Tolimir was Mladić's subordinate and received an order to kill the population in Srebrenica. Let me repeat that Tolimir had never received any sort of order from General Mladić or Karadzic or anyone else with relation to the killing of the prisoners of war. Something that has never happened cannot possibly be proven to have happened either in this world or in heaven, either before worldly courts or heavenly courts. The prosecution, the defense suggests that the trial chamber should render an acquittal on all the counts of the indictment because the prosecution failed to prove that Tolimir had committed any of the crimes against him as alleged in the third amended indictment in the relevant period. And of course, the trial chamber, seized of this case, will render its judgment. All the other submissions by the prosecution that Tolimir should have launched an investigation or make sure that there was punishment following was also without foundation, because where is this evidence that you were allegedly presented with where Tolimir would have been present as of the end of the month of July? He was engaged in Western Bosnia. Furthermore, Tolimir was not charged under 7.3 of the statute of the tribunal. Under command responsibility, or he was charged under Article 7.1 of the statute of the tribunal.
Čarkićeva izjava D217, ne 219 kao što je.
Mr. Gajic, you should switch off the microphone when you have private conservation.
Hvala, gospodin Gajić me...
Thank you. Mr. Gajic has just alerted me to the fact that Čarkić's statement was misrecorded in the transcript. It's D217.
Samo je to rekao.
That was his intervention, and I apologize for not having switched off the microphone.
Hvala, gospodine predsjedniče.
Thank you, Mr. President. That is all I had to say in the time that I had on my disposal. I thank the interpreters and everyone else. And I do apologize for the impediments that I objectively have when I speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tolimir. This indeed concludes your closing arguments. I give the floor now to Mr. McCloskey for his rebuttal. You have the floor for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, General Tolimir stated that the 10th Sabotage Detachment 23 June attack on the tunnel did not fall within the indictment. And this is not true. An attack against the civilian population began with Directive 7 in March. And as the court is aware, an attack does not have to involve armed conflict or combat against the population. It can involve starving and making life unbearable, shelling, and sniping. You'll see this in the Kunarach appeals judgment, paragraph 86. Our indictment does set out shelling and sniping in paragraphs 38 and 60, and Tolimir's responsibility in that regard. Shoulder-fired rockets that were clearly used in the sabotage attack on Srebrenica can be sniping or shelling. The size of those is subjective. This incident has been part of the Srebrenica history and the record of this case for a long time, and it can be no surprise. He also stated that the 10th Sabotage Unit fell under the command of General Mladic and was not controlled by the intel or security sector. We, of course, established early on that this was a main staff unit under the command of Mladic, but we also established early on that, of course, General Mladic, as the commander of the main staff, did not have the time, nor was it his job, to control the specifics of an individual unit like this. And we know very clearly from Salapura, Colonel Salapura, the chief of the intel of the main staff, that it was the intel's department, Tolimir's unit, that controlled and dealt with the 10th Sabotage Unit. Why the general ignored this basic truth and his former subordinate, I don't know. He doesn't explain it in any way, but that's clear as a bell. He also finally brings up Colonel Beara after mentioning in his brief that Beara was irrelevant to this case. Finally says that Beara was not resubordinated, or that he was resubordinated to the Drina Corps along with Colonel Yankovic. Now, we have heard the argument that Colonel Yankovic was resubordinated to the Drina Corps, and it's dealt with in the brief, and I've gone over quite a bit of the information and evidence relating to that, his reports to the main staff, the main staff's directions down to him, the intercepts, the documents. It's very clear that Yankovic is not resubordinated, that he is reporting up to and dealing with the main staff. Look to Momir Nikolić's testimony on that as well. Colonel Beara being resubordinated, the second highest ranking and senior officer in the main staff intel and security section, in fact, the top security officer. It's inconceivable that they would put him as a colonel under the Drina Corps, especially with the few officers they had. The fact that General Tolimir was very busy with lots of things. And again, if we go through the documents, the reports, they are constantly being referred to call up 155 Panorama on the key days, 14, 15 July. It's clear that He is not resubordinated to the Drina Corps. But I'm not going to go into the detail on that. I think it's in the brief, and you know that. And it's also not essential to the criminal responsibility in this case, because, as you're aware, we have spent a lot of time showing the responsibilities of General Tolimir as the chief of the sector for intel and security. He is the top person that's responsible for the professional supervision of the security branches in the areas of which he and they are experts, whether they are under his command or not, as long as they are involved in matters related to the expertise of the security branch. And as you've learned, he has that responsibility from the brigades all the way through the corps to the main staff. This is his responsibility. Now, I'll touch briefly just on what the responsibility is related to the crime of this case, because we have a nice statement from General Milovanovic, who, in an answer to in describing the situation, this is what he said at 14243 to 14244. The other administration under Tolimir's administration or command was the Security Administration, headed by Colonel Bayara, and their task was to make sure that the military information at the disposal of the Republika Srpska and about the Republika Srpska Army would not leak to the enemy. That's one thing. We've referred to that as the chief secret keeper. This was something done in a passive manner, so to speak. That's at least how I understood it. But part of the active part of these duties was interrogating prisoners of war, securing them by using military police, and the such. So there, out of General Milovanovic, is the crux of his responsibility that is relevant to this case. And it's important to understand that. Now, I also want to give you the guts of what it was to professionally supervise not only his own people, but his subordinate branches. And I'll cite two exhibits that were put in by General Tolimir. They are from the former Yugoslavia. The first is D00202, and I'll just read the brief section. This is from Article 29, Item 9. The security organ is responsible for, and number 9, expertly directing security organs and the military police in the Corps Command and the units and other JNA units in the zone of responsibility. And here are the key words: organizing, directing, and coordinating their activities, providing assistance, and controlling their work. So that's just one rule. Let me go to the next rule he cites, D00203, from Chapter 2, Item 18. This is from 1984 rule. The other was from a 1990 rule. The security organs provide specialist administrative services for security organs in subordinate commands, units, institutions, and staffs of the armed forces. Provide assistance to these organs, and again, organize, direct, coordinate, and supervise their work. He wants to say he's in JEPA and has no contact or any dealings with his people or his subordinate security branch. Not true. He retains professional supervision over them. So even if Behara or his other people are, for some reason, resubordinated to the Corps, he retains professional responsibility over them. It's either that or command responsibility over them. And this is his job. There's one word that's left out of the professional supervision and related to his job, and that is the word you have heard, that assistant commanders are also responsible for the implementation of orders of their commander along the expert lines that have to do with that order. In fact, one witness referred to it as experts in implementation. And as assistant commander for Intel and Security Sector, he was an expert in implementation through his staff and through the security branches of the VRS. He doesn't need to receive the order himself. It doesn't even need to go through him. Once there is an order out there that has the responsibility of the security branches, especially Colonel Behara, Solapur, and others, he, in his position, is responsible to implement it, along with all the other words: organize, supervise, monitor. These are the black letter law of his responsibility that he is well aware of, and he can't just shirk them off by saying he's gone to JEPA. Let me go to General Tolimir's questioning of General Skrbich on this very point on the 30th of January 2012 on page 18555. And Mr. Tolimir asked this question. And you remember Skrbich was an assistant commander, I believe, for personnel affairs. Did assistant commanders control the business in their sectors in accordance with the commander's decisions, or are they entitled to change it? Thank you. They can answer. They cannot change it, but what they cannot change is the commander's order, whereas a decision is part of an order. Tolimir, thank you. Let me repeat my question. Can they change the commander's decision or order? Thank you. Answer. They cannot change either. Question. Thank you. Can they control the business or task in order to achieve what the commander ordered? Thank you. Answer by General Skrbich. They are experts for the implementation of the commander's order and decision in the best possible way. So here is General Skrbich telling us precisely what the regulations say. So put that into his professional responsibility, put that into his responsibility as an assistant commander. They apply to wherever he is on duty, and they are his responsibilities, none of which he has been able to explain away to you. These are the rules he lived by. His career was grown up with, and he cannot shirk them at this point. One of the best examples of General Tolimir professionally supervising the security branches and the personnel. I've gone over at length the documents of the 12th and the 13th and those proposals and even orders to various people for lists and to make proposals to commanders and others. But I want to take you to the 16th of July because here, as the general just mentioned, we have an order from General Mladic to Kasarevic to take over command of a sweep operation, which is a combat task. And where does General Tolimir fit into this? Well, he's present at the time, and he advises Kasarevic about it. He even, according to Kasarevic, speaks to Mladic about it, and then gets back and speaks to Kasarevic. But the key point to remember is Tolimir provides directions to Kasarevic to pass on to Jankovic regarding what Jankovic is doing in Bratunac. Kasarevic will admit he's being directed to deal with the wounded Muslims, but these are Muslim prisoners. Of course, there are prisoner issues. They're the prisoners in Bratunac. His subordinate in the professional line is dealing with them. He passes on directions to Kasarevic to deal with it. So on the evening of 16 July, General Tolimir is at Crni Rijeka doing his job. He's professionally supervising the work of Jankovic. He also provides Kasarevic information about the whereabouts of Colonel Beara. I'm sure he provided him more than the whereabouts, but that's what Kasarevic was able to tell us before he shut his mouth. So this is one of the excellent examples of professional supervision and implementation. And the implementation of the order that Mladic gave to Kasarevic, this, as you know, a sweep operation can involve taking prisoners, and it did in this case. A witness, PW52, who was a commander of the RS MOOC that was working under the command of the Army, his testimony is in this case, and he talked about that sweep operation and that they took approximately up to 200 prisoners. 17 July, 200 prisoners. There's no record of those folks. Aside that we do know they did a sweep operation and took 200 prisoners. So this would be an issue for the security branches. And indeed, you remember the intercept that related to Kasarevic. It was Kasarevic, has he seen Momir Nikolic on the morning of the 17th? So Kasarevic is dealing with Momir Nikolic. We don't know about what, but a sweep operation in the middle of a murder operation that ends up with capturing prisoners, it's not hard to guess. And we also know from the 17th, 18th, 19th of July that Jankovic was looking to Tosho, to Tolimir, to help decide what to do with the MSF workers. So he's clearly on duty, in charge, doing his job the 16th. He's the person that they're looking to advise on what to do with prisoners on the 17th and 18th. Look to the Kasarevic letter, the Kasarevic testimony and order to see Tolimir at work. It's amazing Kasarevic gave us as much as he did, but he did, and he exposes the fallacy in what the general's been saying. Now getting to what I felt was two watershed moments yesterday, and it's first as the general got to his proposal in the late evening of 13 July to bring 800 Muslims secretly to Shamatz, to this farm. And that he was only, he told you, concerned about their adequate care and knew nothing about the murder operation. Reminder, the Luke school victims who had been systematically taken off the buses right before crossing to Kladon were murdered the night of the 13th. The Yadar victims had been killed, the 15 people that morning. Kravica warehouse had 1,000 people dead. The controversy over where to send the prisoners was in full swing. Eventually, Zvornik was the decision. I won't go over that again. And where were the top people in his life? Mladic, that day on the 13th, was in Srebrenica, going up and down Kravica, Sikonjevic-Polje a good part of the day. Bear was in Bratunac, walking to the schools in Bratunac with the Jelanovic, the lawyer, sent Nikolic to Zvornik to deal with prisoners. Salapur was in Nova Kasaba, we know that, at 10:15 a.m. from an intercept where he was dealing with prisoners. Then he was on his own admission in Srebrenica with Mladic. We see him on the video to that effect. Jankovic on the 13th is in Potocari. He's directing Bratunac's MP to count the separated prisoners, clearly engaged in the organization and implementation of the murder operation. Popovic is in Bratunac going along the road, Kravice-Konjevic-Polje, and I won't remind you what the various brigade security officers are doing. That's very clear. We know that Tolimir is in communication because he receives information about the thousands of prisoners, the subject of his proposal. Is it really imaginable that the person that is the most well-informed of the VRS, who is working within the Drina Corps zone of responsibility, is actively receiving top secret information about prisoners, that many dead people and that many of his people that are on the ground at work, that he, on the evening of 13 July, doesn't know about the operation? Impossible. His explanation for the meaning of the document really was exposed yesterday. He says he's trying to just look after these folks. But he never explained the agricultural work, the lack of agricultural work that was clearly set out by an officer that, again, was no friend of ours. And also, if he was really concerned about their care, their adequately housing them in the Rogatica area, why didn't he recommend the Rogatica prison? Razadnik. Remember seeing that area? It's a large area, a lot of buildings. It's an ongoing prison. They put 40, 50 people there right after Žepa. That was a place that could have handled people, was ready to go. It wasn't out in the middle of nowhere as a massive pig farm that looked more like Kravica than Kravica. It's already a prison. We also know that not far away in Foča, the Srbija prison, Tolimir Exhibit P2256, 14 August document, Beara communicates to Tolimir that this prison can handle up to 1,000 folks. The problem with these prisons, as you know, in Rogatica, is the ICRC visited that prison. And the 1,000 prisoners from Serbia had already been registered by the ICRC, which is in the record. So General Tolimir picked this out-of-the-way place that he clearly learned about from Charkic in order to bring people down and kill them. Had he wanted to care for them, he had the places right in his backyard. Prisoners of war shall be treated humanely. In particular, they must be protected against violence, insults, and intimidation. This is P02482, Article 210, SFRY regs. He knows his job. Finally, the untruth from yesterday that shook me to my very insides was when he finally responded to Todorovic's testimony, the chief of the security branch of the East Bosnia Corps. When Todorovic testified, he was contacted by Tolimir, perhaps in person, and told to arrange for 1,000 to 1,200 prisoners at Batkovic, and most essentially, within 24 hours, soon thereafter, 48, maybe 3 days, according to his statement. Please look at the statement that's part of this case. It's the complete statement. It's an interview transcribed from 2007, I believe. What does he say about that? Critical evidence. Almost nothing. He says he's not reliable. He's just not reliable. And that's all he says. We looked at the record to see if General Tolimir challenged the reliability of this witness when he testified, a witness who was clearly not our friend. And as you remember, when he testified, he stretched those days beyond 3 into 4 to even 5, perhaps. And we found at 20 April 2011 this question by General Tolimir about Todorovich's interview with the prosecution when he provided these key details. And Tolimir asks this: when providing this interview, did you always repeatedly say that you were uncertain about the time precisely? Because a lot of time has elapsed and that you cannot be specific as to the date. Answer: yes. Question: is there a possibility that later on, when questions were put to you and insistence placed on confirming something you cannot recall, you made certain changes to the original interview you provided in Belgrade? Answer: partially yes. But the gist of my original statement remains unchanged. Look at Todorovich's testimony. Look at his statement. Solid as a rock. He is no friend of the prosecution's. He is the friend of Tolimir's. But he was honest enough several years ago to provide the details that Tolimir cannot live with. Now, is there support? He does say that he's not sure about the date. It's after the fall of Srebrenica. There's only one fall of Srebrenica where the VRS enters Srebrenica and takes prisoners. It's nothing that anyone could confuse with any other date. But what about dates? Can we get closer to it? Well, the answer is yes, we can. Do you remember General Tolimir's driver, Mile Micic? And he testified on this point. He testified he drove up to the East Bosnia Corps and took General Tolimir to the offices of the East Bosnia Corps Security. You may remember he said he was absolutely sure it happened on 12 July. He wasn't sure of a lot, this witness. He was Tolimir's driver and friend. But one thing he was absolutely sure was 12th of July. Do you remember why he was so sure it was 12th of July? It's because 12 July, as it is every year, was his name Saint's Day. St. Peter. St. Peter. There is poetic justice. Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCloskey. Mr. Tolimir, do you intend to respond to that? You have the opportunity to do that in 30 minutes, up to 30 minutes, if you wish so.
Thank you, Mr. President. Certainly I wish to respond. I wish to say a few words.
Yes, do so.
Since I don't have time for preparation, I'll start with last things first. With the last prosecutor's allegation, the prosecutor alleges that Todorovic remembers everything. I, on the other hand, remember, and you remember that Todorovic didn't even remember that he was with me on the 12th. how come he could not remember that I was with him on the 12th, and he still remember other dates when I told him something? He himself told us that he changed his statement after the conversation with the prosecutor. He himself stated that he thought that he had seen the document that was signed by Milovanovic in 1993 concerning prisoners of war, but he could not remember when the document was drafted, and all of a sudden he remembered in 2007 what had happened. After 10 years, he remembered. That's why I maintain that his statement is ambiguous, that it leaves a lot to be desired. You can interpret it any way you want. This is the first thing that I wanted to mention. Secondly, Todorovic stated to the prosecutor that he made a contact with Tolimir. How did he do that? Is there any proof to the fact how he made a contact with Tolimir? Nobody could contact Tolimir because there was no telephones in Jepa. There was no telephone connection between the main staff and the checkpoint, which was between the two firing lines of Amprofor on the hilltop called Bosnica. I wanted to say in my closing argument that there was a telephone there, but there was only a telephone line which reached not further than the checkpoint of Amprofor from the forward command post, and nobody could use it to call anybody else but the brigade, because there was no switchboard there. No information was sent to the forward line, to Tolimir, about what was being on in his area of responsibility, because he had substitutes, officers who replaced him when he was not there. This is common practice. When the officer in charge is absent, there are other people who stand in for him. Second of all, the prosecutor just claimed that I was looking for accommodation for prisoners of war. No, that's not true. I only offered them a possibility. I told them there is a possibility of accommodation. I was not the one actively looking for accommodation. I was not in charge of that. It was erroneously interpreted that I was in charge of the accommodation. That's not true. I only told them where there was accommodation available, and that accommodation was not in a prison. It was accommodation in agricultural facility. Charkic testified about that. A unit of the brigade was billeted there before that. So these premises were not prison premises. The prosecutor alleged that Jankovic was in charge of POWs. Jankovic was in charge of contacts with Amprofor and international organizations. Médecins Sans Frontières and Amprofor were in charge of transferring prisoners of war to the locations where they wanted to transfer them to, and they were in constant communication with Jankovic about that. Tolimir could only advise him what to do when he received that document. That's why Đurđić told me on the 16th that Tolimir would arrive. Salapur himself testified that he could not get in touch with Tolimir all the time while he was in the main staff. Todorovic also, from the Eastern Bosnia Corps, could not do that, and neither could Salapur from the main staff. In professional terms, professional guidance and professional management does not concern the crimes charged that Mr. McCloskey spoke about when he cited the rules in D0020 and D00203. When it comes to professionalism and professional guidance, the security organ guides professionally his own officers as to how to apply methods of work concerning the work of security organs. This is not about a command. That person is the only one trained for applying covert methods of work, like intercepting conversations and other methods that are used in civilian life as well as in military, searching premises and other things. These are not command duties and tasks. What I'm trying to say is that Tolimir could not supervise anybody whom command sent on a mission like he did Keserovic and Stanko, who were organs in my department. Furthermore, the prosecutor has just stated that my organs were in charge of supervising the military police. We've heard several witnesses who have repeatedly testified that the military police were always subordinated to the commander, not to the security organ. The security organ can only propose their use, and that's where his duty stops. The commanders are those who supervise the implementation of their tasks and orders, not the security organs.
Dalje,
Furthermore, when it comes to the attack in the tunnel, Mr. Salapora testified about that. And he said that no civilians were targeted or attacked. The tunnel did not involve the civilian population. It was just a demonstration of force about the possibility of entering Srebrenica through a tunnel that had not been in use for years. It was a diversionary action. It was not an attack against the civilian population. Mr. Salapura was shown a document drafted by Ramiz Bečirović from the 20th A Division. He reported to Nasir that nobody had been killed, and Nasir was his commander, he was his deputy, and that's why he reported to his superior, to his commander.
to su otprilike.
These are more or less my replies to what the prosecutor has stated in a rebuttal. I thank you. I apologize to everybody. I apologize to the prosecutor, but I had to highlight those things which are not objectively true. I will never say a lie, because I'm not only responsible before this trial chamber. We will all be judged by our Savior one day. I prefer to be found guilty here, but to be found guilty before my Savior. That's why I apologize to you, and I apologize to the prosecutor for having alerted him to the fact that the allegations were incorrect and they erroneously represented the place where I was during the incriminated events. Where I come from, there is a saying that you shouldn't tell lies and falsely accuse anybody without any arguments. I cannot speak about the things that I don't know, but I can tell you what I do know, and I'm telling the truth. I apologize to everybody, to the interpreters. I apologize for having spoken very fast and for my poor articulation and other impediments. I wish you all God's blessings. May Godspeed be with all of you when you perform your duties in keeping with God's will. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tolimir. I have to say there's no need for apologies. You are permitted to present your arguments, as is the prosecution, and in fact it was your duty as part of the defense to present all your thoughts and arguments. We are at the end of the closing arguments, but there are two remaining issues I have to raise. One is a translation issue. In the last couple of days, there was an informal communication between the parties and the chamber about one document where there is some doubt about the accuracy of the translation, which seems to be quite important. We listened very carefully to your oral submissions 2 days ago, Mr. McCloskey. I just would like to remind you, it's your duty to clarify that with CLSS, and please inform the opposing party and the chamber about any achievements you were able to make.
Yes, Ms. Stewart was able to do that today, and we should hear, it's of course something she's done frequently, and we expect to have that fixed very soon. I've spoken to Mr. Gajic about it. We all agree CLSS is exactly correct, and tried to make my submissions reflect that as much as possible.
I noticed that, but it is also important for the final briefs and the document itself, and for the judgment, of course. We all have to, especially it's now for the chamber, to review the evidence presented to the chamber in the last 2 years, and of course the final briefs and the oral submissions we have listened to this week. One final thing we have to discuss briefly. I got a list of, I think, 15 documents we have to clarify just briefly. The parties have gotten information from the chamber that we have to deal with that today, as it is the last day of our hearings before the judgment. I go through the list briefly. D72. We don't need any information from the parties. The registry should update the surrogate sheet for this document, D72, and change the status to exhibit. I would like to invite the parties, if there's anything you want to raise in relation to a specific document, you should do that. D74, the defense has uploaded a condensed version with translation. This 26-page version, 1D05 1349. This shall replace the original version with the number 1D01 0787. The next document is D76. The registry should replace the document with a surrogate sheet, since it is a duplicate of the exhibit D16, and the status of the document should be changed to an exhibit. D234 is the next one. It's also a condensed version and translation uploaded on the 11th of June. The defense notified the chamber about this on the 21st of August. We admit the condensed 27-page version. It's document ID 1D06 1656, and this will replace the original version 1D 04 1697. The next document is D267. Translation is now uploaded on the 11th of June, and the chamber was notified on the 21st of June about this. It's no longer MFI'd, pending translation, but document D267. The next document is D290. The translation is uploaded on the 21st of August. The document is now admitted. The translation for D356 was uploaded on the 27th of February. The chamber was informed only on the 21st of August. Now the document is admitted as D356. The situation is similar with D360. The translation uploaded on the 27th of February. The Chamber was informed about that on the 21st of August. The document is now admitted into evidence. The next document is D363. The translation was uploaded on the same 27th of February. The Chamber informed on the 21st of August. The document is admitted. The next is D364. The translation was uploaded on the 16th of April. The Chamber was informed on the 21st of August. The document is admitted as D364. I turn now to P1000. The Chamber has denied admission by the decision of the 14th of May of this year, but we didn't give any instruction to the registry how to deal with this. The document should be noted as marked but not admitted, pursuant to the decision of the Chamber of 14th of May. I turn now to P1001. The situation is the same. The admission was denied by the 14th of May decision. It will be now marked but not admitted. P1369. The translation was uploaded, but the Chamber was not informed about that. Mr. McCloskey, can you confirm that the translation has been uploaded?
Yes, I can. According to our research, it has been.
Thank you very much. The document is now admitted into evidence as P1369. The last document is P1617. The OTP indicated that it would offer this document through bar table motion, but the prosecution did not. And therefore, we changed the status to marked but not admitted. This concludes this matter. Therefore, I would like to come to my last point. On behalf of the Chamber, I should like to say a few words of thanks. We are approaching the end of a trial that began 2.5 years ago. We have heard the testimony of 130 witnesses, some of whom have been here for several days. Over 3,000 exhibits have been admitted. Nearly 20,000 pages of transcript were produced. There has been the usual flow of written motions, responses, and decisions. It has been a long and arduous process. Occasionally there have been difficulties, but every person now in this courtroom has contributed in his or her own way to ensuring that this trial has reached the present stage, having proceeded relatively smoothly. Let me first thank my fellow judges, Judge Mindwa and Judge Nyambe, for the cooperation in the Chamber. Next, I should thank both the prosecution team and the defense team for the manner in which they have conducted the proceedings and for their communication. Despite the length of the trial, there has been a pleasant but businesslike atmosphere in court and very little acrimony. I thank both teams for this and for cooperating well on the whole during the trial, both with each other and with the Chamber. There have been those who assisted the Chamber directly in its work. These are the judges' assistants and the Tolimir team. This team has fully performed the functions conscientiously and to the best of the abilities and made the task of the Chamber easier. Thank you for that. I should also like to thank the staff of the registry. First and foremost, the court officer, several court ushers, the stenographers, the court reporters, interpreters, and the translators. Never in the courtroom, but we had to rely on their hard work. The IT staff, we had them quite often in the courtroom when we faced difficulties. And especially the security staff, and I hope very much that the security officer will convey this thanks to all his colleagues. And I think, especially in this case, I would include the staff of the Yundu, including the medical staff of the detention unit, which assisted in some stages of the trial, especially for Mr. Tolimir. Everyone else in the registry who has given us assistance at one time or another. The contribution of the registry staff is sometimes forgotten, but we as a chamber have been aware of it and have appreciated it very much. Each of the staff has played an essential role in a process that is immensely complicated from a logistical point of view. The chamber will now be deliberating, and the next step will be the issuance of the judgment. We will now adjourn, and the day of the delivery of the judgment will be announced at a later stage. We adjourn.
All rise. Veuillez vous lever.